When my wife and I arrived at the Halloween party, the atmosphere was already buzzing with energy. It was impossible not to notice her athletic figure accentuated by the sleek, jet-black Catwoman costume she had chosen. Despite being a mother of two, Vanessa looked absolutely stunning, so much so that I sometimes forget just how breathtaking she truly is. In contrast, I had opted for a pirate costume. Not exactly hot, but I felt I didn't look half bad either. Vanessa leaned in to give me a quick peck on the cheek before drifting off to mingle with the other guests. Meanwhile, I made my way toward the drinks table, where my friends were animatedly debating a timeless question: Hulk or Superman? The topic struck me as amusingly juvenile, considering the level of intellect present in the room. To me, the answer was obvious. Superman had to be the clear winner. Nonetheless, I decided to join in, my confidence bolstered by years of devouring Marvel and DC comics as a kid. I hoped my input would settle the argument, but instead, my reasoning only seemed to throw more fuel on the fire. The conversation soon spiraled into playful chaos, which is what usually happens when you mix beer with a bunch of grown men acting like teenagers. Eventually, we decided to drop the topic and focus on enjoying the evening, which offered plenty of booze and laughter. Knowing Vanessa wouldn't want to leave anytime soon, I resolved to pace myself with the drinks and stay relatively sober. She was clearly having a great time chatting with her best friend, Claire, who was also dressed as Catwoman. Vanessa and Claire had been inseparable since middle school, despite their stark differences in personality. They often joked, much to their mutual annoyance, that they could have been switched at birth, given their similar upbringings. Claire was married to Ethan, a man who was as different from me as night is from day. While I made my living managing restaurants, Ethan worked a physically demanding job in a local factory. His job required long hours of heavy lifting, and it showed in his muscular build. Unlike me, who was still reasonably fit thanks to my college boxing days, Ethan had a physique that screamed gym rat. His long hair, usually tied back in a ponytail, combined with his beard, gave him an unmistakable Aztec warrior vibe. If Ethan was Khal Drogo from Game of Thrones, I was more like Don Draper from Mad Men, polished but far from intimidating. I had never been particularly fond of Ethan, though I didn't outright dislike him either. Our connection was purely through Claire, so our interactions were limited to events like this one. Tonight, he was sporting a Tarzan costume, which struck me as a questionable choice given the chilly weather. It seemed to encapsulate his knack for making bold, but often ill-thought-out decisions. Ethan's flirtatious nature, which often crossed the line of appropriateness, didn't sit well with me. Yet, most of the women, Vanessa included, seemed to find it more entertaining than offensive. This frustrated me, especially since Claire rarely did more than laugh it off. At times, she'd tease him about it, but it was clear she wasn't truly bothered. If anything, she seemed to take pride in his ability to command attention. As the night wore on and the alcohol loosened Ethan's inhibitions, his flirtations became more overt. He seemed unconcerned whether the women he charmed were single or married. Although some of the husbands might have been irked by his behavior, no one spoke up, likely out of fear of creating a scene or simply because they were too drunk to care. I, however, kept a close eye on him, prepared to step in if he crossed a line with Vanessa. Sensing my tension, Vanessa came over, her voice rising above the music. "Having fun, Nathan?" she asked with a bright smile. I gave a small nod and sipped my beer, my eyes scanning the room. She started swaying lightly to the music, her body brushing against mine as she stood close. But then, her gaze shifted toward Tarzan. "Ethan." I caught her appraising his chiseled frame, and a twinge of jealousy shot through me. Her lingering attention made my chest tighten. What kind of person wears a Tarzan costume in weather like this? I muttered, half to myself. Vanessa blinked and turned back to me, as if snapping out of a trance. "Oh, you know Ethan. Always desperate to be the center of attention," she said with a smirk. I chuckled dryly, but my beer suddenly tasted bitter. Vanessa picked up on my shift in mood. "Are you jealous?" she asked, her tone playful yet probing. "Jealous of him? Hardly," I replied, my voice defensive. "I don't need to strip down to get attention." Vanessa laughed, brushing off my comment. "Of course not, sweetheart," she said, her tone light. But as she turned back toward Ethan, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling growing inside me. As the night wore on and the alcohol flowed freely, inhibitions continued to drop. Ethan and his minimalistic loincloth outfit faded from my focus as I mingled with the few people I genuinely enjoyed spending time with. It wasn't until much later that I noticed something unsettling. Ethan seemed to be making advances toward Vanessa. When I went looking for her, I found them in the kitchen, deeply engrossed in what looked like an intimate conversation. A surge of jealousy roared to life within me. The moment Ethan spotted me, he backed away, his usual cocky demeanor faltering. Vanessa, sensing my anger, turned to me with a strained smile. "Hi, darling. I was just looking for you," she said hurriedly, her voice betraying her unease. "Really? In the same spot all night?" I replied, the accusation clear in my tone. "What exactly were you two talking about? You look pretty comfortable." Vanessa waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, Nathan, nothing happened. Ethan was just being his usual flirty self," she said, attempting to downplay the situation. Her response did little to ease my suspicions. "I'm just a little tipsy, honey. Don't worry about it," she added, patting my cheek before leaving the room. For the rest of the night, she and Ethan kept their distance, but I couldn't ignore the occasional furtive glances they exchanged. Each one twisted the knife of doubt deeper. Later, needing a break from the mounting tension, and the beer starting to hit me, I headed to the bathroom. As I exited, I ran straight into Ethan, as if he had been waiting for me. "Got a problem, Nathan?" he slurred, his bloodshot eyes narrowing in a menacing glare. The surrealness of the moment caught me off guard. "What?" I asked, baffled. "You think you're better than me, don't you?" he continued, his words dripping with intoxicated malice. "You've always looked down on me, thinking your money and your suits make you superior." I stared at him, confused by the sudden accusation. "You're drunk, Ethan. Go home before you say something you'll regret," I warned, stepping past him. "Regret? Like sleeping with your gorgeous wife?" he sneered, his words freezing me in place. I turned back, my body rigid with fury. "What did you just say?" I demanded, my voice low and dangerous. Ethan smirked. "You heard me. Don't act so shocked, Nathan. They weren't fantasies, just memories." His words hit me like a thunderclap, shattering any composure I had left. "You're full of it," I retorted, though my voice faltered slightly. Ethan chuckled darkly and took it further, making crude remarks about Vanessa. That was the final straw. My fist connected with his jaw before I even realized what I was doing. The sound of the impact echoed in the hallway as he crumpled to the floor, unconscious. Descending the stairs, I found Vanessa. Her tear-filled eyes met mine, and in that instant I knew. The truth was written all over her face. She didn't need to say a word. Her guilt confirmed Ethan's claims. "Call emergency. Ethan's unconscious," she cried out, her voice trembling with panic. Chaos erupted upstairs as people gathered around the fallen man. But I couldn't bring myself to care about his fate. All I could think about was Vanessa. I stared at her, searching for the woman I had married, but she felt like a stranger. "What the hell did you do to my husband?" Claire's furious scream cut through the air as she lunged at me, her fists pounding my back. I stepped aside, avoiding her swings, until someone pulled her away. "Nathan, what's going on?" Daniel, the party host, asked, his tone sharp with confusion. Ignoring him, I turned to Claire. "Did you know?" I demanded. "Did you know your husband slept with Vanessa?" Her silence answered everything. She didn't shout or deny it. She just looked at me with a strange mix of resignation and pity. Vanessa placed a trembling hand on my shoulder. "Nathan, we need to talk." "But not here," she said softly. I turned to her, the dam of my emotions breaking. Rage surged through me, tears stinging my eyes as I struggled to contain the storm inside. The sound of someone shouting, "He's awake!" from upstairs snapped me back to reality. Claire ran off to check on Ethan while I stood there, my anger beginning to ebb as the enormity of the situation sank in. What if I had killed him in a moment of blind fury? Assault was bad enough, but manslaughter? I'd be throwing away my career, my freedom, everything I'd worked so hard to build. And all for a man who had disrespected me and my marriage in the worst way possible. Vanessa's voice broke through my spiraling thoughts. Nathan, let's go home and talk. Please. We need to figure this out, she pleaded, her face streaked with tears. No, Vanessa, I said firmly. You're going home with Ethan and Claire. I'm leaving. As I turned toward the door, she grabbed my arm, desperation thick in her voice. You can't just leave me here. We're going home. Together. We're talking about this. You're not leaving me behind, she cried, her words a mix of anger and anguish. Her intensity baffled me. She was the one in the wrong, yet she seemed furious with me. You don't get it, Vanessa, I said, my voice heavy with exhaustion. If I go home with you now, I might lose control. I'm not going to add domestic violence to the list of tonight's disasters. Damn you, Nathan. Damn you, she shouted, her voice breaking. Go ahead. Hit me if that's what it takes to make you feel something. It'd be the first time you've touched me in weeks, she added, her finger jabbing into my chest as she let her anger explode. Her words stunned me, leaving me speechless. Was this what it had come to? A marriage unraveling in front of everyone, filled with bitterness and resentment? Don't cuddle you every night? Is that your excuse? Is that why you cheated on me with this idiot? I asked, my voice shaking with anger. Vanessa didn't answer with words, but the defiance in her glare said everything. Well, just so you know, Vanessa, I actually work for a living. I don't have a husband to pay my bills. Maybe if you had a job, you'd understand what it's like to come home drained every night. My words lashed out before I even realized our audience was riveted, watching the drama unfold like a blockbuster movie. Vanessa smirked bitterly. Poor Nathan, she mocked, her voice thick with sarcasm. Too tired for his wife, but not too tired for his precious adult movies. Maybe if you paid attention to your real wife instead of those silicone Barbie dolls online, she wouldn't have to confide in her friend about how neglected she feels. Her voice rose to a crescendo, her fists clenched, and tears streamed down her face. An unholy mix of rage and heartbreak. I had no clever response, no cutting comeback. Speechless, I stood there, absorbing the judgmental stares of friends and neighbors alike. Their expressions ranged from shock to pity, with a touch of morbid fascination. The humiliation was complete. I had to get out of there. Vanessa's cries followed me as I stormed out, slamming the door behind me and jumping into my car. Her voice was still echoing in my mind as I started the engine and drove off into the night. This isn't actually Nathan's story, though. It's mine, Daniel, the party host. Yes, I'm the one who now has a massive hole in my drywall, conveniently located right next to my daughter's room. Writing this from Nathan's perspective allowed me to dive into the raw anger and humiliation he felt that night. My wife and I have discussed this incident at length. It's like witnessing a slow-motion train wreck. You want to look away, but you just can't. One thing I couldn't help but notice was Claire's reaction, or lack thereof, when Nathan revealed Vanessa's affair with Ethan. She didn't lash out or deny anything. Her calmness made me wonder. Had she already known? Was she complicit in some kind of ménage à trois? Or was there an entirely different explanation? Either way, her silence spoke volumes. Reflecting on the party, I recalled the stolen glances between Vanessa and Ethan throughout the night. Was this affair a fleeting mistake or something that had been brewing for weeks? Or even months? I might be overthinking it, but the signs seemed clear. Nathan, for all his flaws, may have been neglecting Vanessa emotionally, physically, or both. But does that excuse her betrayal? Hardly. Does it explain it? Perhaps. Women who feel consistently rejected, whether in the bedroom or elsewhere, may be more tempted to stray, especially if their partner shows more interest in other women or even adult content, which can feel like a different kind of infidelity. For the record, Vanessa is stunning in real life. I'd even go so far as to say any man would find her irresistible. But as the old saying goes, for every beautiful woman, there's a man who's tired of being with her. The real question now is, what happens next? For now, the four of them, Nathan, Vanessa, Ethan, and Claire, have gone radio silent. But secrets like these have a way of surfacing. It's only a matter of time before the full story emerges. Full disclosure, I'm biased. Nathan is a friend of mine, and I can't help but sympathize with the tough choices he faces. Regardless of her reasons, Vanessa treated him unfairly. Reconciliation? Divorce? I don't know what's best for him. What I do know is that Superman would absolutely destroy the Hulk. Unless kryptonite was involved, of course. But that's beside the point. Mr. Gray, you've got a call on line 1, Sarah's voice crackled through the intercom. Who is it? I asked, distracted. It's Mr. Thompson, Nathan, she replied, hesitating. He sounds upset. Well, considering his wife humiliated him in front of half the neighborhood, I'd be worried if he wasn't upset. Thanks, Sarah. I'll take it from here. The line clicked, and Nathan's voice came through, heavy with suppressed rage. Hey, Daniel. It's been a while, he said. I've been trying to reach you since. I trailed off, unable to finish. Ever since I found out about Vanessa and Ethan, I didn't know how to approach him. Since I found out my wife was sleeping with that idiot, Nathan finished for me, his voice taut with anger. Even through the phone, I could feel the storm brewing beneath his calm tone. Nathan's frustration poured through the phone like a storm cloud ready to burst. His emotions were so palpable, I felt the weight of them through the line. So, do you want to talk about it? I asked hesitantly. Nathan chuckled, a bitter, almost derisive sound. Why would I want to talk to you, Daniel? Huh? So you can write another story and broadcast it online? Does your little drama need a sequel? Are people dying to find out what happened next to the guy who couldn't keep his wife happy? His voice dripped with sarcasm, each word like a slap. Great. Not only was Nathan furious at his cheating wife, her backstabbing friend, and her Neanderthal lover, but now I was added to his hit list. Perfect. Nathan and I went way back. We'd been high school buddies. He was the baseball star. I was the football guy. We'd lost touch after graduation. He went off to college, and I joined the Air Force. Years later, we reconnected when I moved back to town. By then, he was managing an olive garden, something I loved to tease him about. He'd laugh it off, saying he'd climbed the ranks to district manager, which was true. He was making nearly as much as I was. Now, though, my old friend wasn't laughing. Look, Nathan, I wasn't trying to embarrass you, I said cautiously. I just wanted people to understand what you were going through. Oh, you mean where I tucked my tail and ran like a coward? Great touch, by the way, he snapped, his tone brimming with venom. I sighed, realizing this conversation wasn't going to be easy. Nathan, where are you? We need to talk, I urged. Talk? That's rich, Daniel. You know what's funny? I've suddenly become real popular. Everyone wants to talk to me these days. Must be my winning personality. His voice slurred slightly, and I heard the unmistakable clink of glass against a bottle. Nathan, are you drunk? I asked, my concern growing. No, Daniel. I was drunk. Now, who the hell knows? He replied bitterly. All right, I get it, I messed up, but I'm trying to make it right. Where are you? I pressed, grabbing my coat and keys. Don't bother. Screw you, Daniel. Don't you dare show up at this bar. I'll mess you up if you do, he warned, and the line went dead. But I didn't need him to tell me. I already knew where he was. There weren't many places in town Nathan liked, but Moe's Bar was his favorite. Partly because of Lila, the bartender he flirted with endlessly. She had that rare mix of charm and unattainability that made her irresistible to him. When I walked into Moe's, my heart sank. Nathan was slumped over the bar, a solitary figure with a half-empty glass in his hand. Lila glanced at me, her expression tinged with worry. Does this guy belong to you? She teased, though her tone lacked its usual playfulness. I nodded. Before I could say a word, Nathan's fist collided with my face. Stars exploded in my vision as I staggered backward, my hand flying to my lip, which was already bleeding. Figures, I muttered to myself, wiping the blood away. No wonder Ethan ended up in the wall. Nathan returned to his stool, his rage dissipating as quickly as it had come. Lila started toward us, concern etched across her face. I waved her off, signaling that everything was fine. She hesitated, then gave me a slight nod before retreating to the other side of the bar. Once I sat down next to Nathan, I said, "Can we talk now?" "Off the record," he quipped sarcastically, taking another swig of his beer. At least his sense of humor was intact. "You really hit a nerve, Daniel," he muttered, staring into his glass. "It was bad enough living through that night. Then reading about it, knowing everyone knew it was me? Thanks for that." "Nathan, I'm sorry. I said earnestly. I wasn't trying to humiliate you. He cut me off. A Halloween party with 2 catwomen, Tarzan, and a pirate who throws Tarzan into the wall? How many parties like that do you think there are, Daniel? Fair point. I opened my mouth to respond, but closed it again when I saw the anger simmering in his eyes. Humor wouldn't help here. You're right, Nathan. I was an idiot. I shouldn't have written about it, and I'm sorry, I said, meaning every word. He glared at me for a moment, then shook his head. Well, I'm not sorry for punching you. I chuckled, despite the throbbing pain in my jaw. You still punch like a girl, though. No wonder you always got your ass kicked in boxing. That broke the tension. A reluctant smile tugged at the corner of his lips. Soon, I managed to coax him into my car, Lila shooting me a grateful look as we left. Take care of him, Daniel, she said softly. He's been through a lot. When we got to my house, I called Adam. Hey, Richie Rich. What's up? Adam answered cheerfully, always his usual playful self. I need a hand. Nathan's out cold, and I need help getting him inside, I explained. On my way, Adam replied. Together, we managed to get Nathan onto the couch in my basement. After a quick chat, Adam left, promising to check in later. Not long after, Emma came home with the kids. What brings you home so early? She asked, kissing my cheek. Found Nathan at Moe's. Brought him back here, I explained. She frowned, glancing toward the basement. Are you sure that's a good idea? She asked. I don't want him causing a scene around the kids. He'll be fine. I'll keep an eye on him, I assured her. When she noticed my swelling jaw, her eyes widened. What happened? Did he hit you? Don't worry about it, I said, trying to brush it off. Emma shook her head. Well, I hope he's worth all this trouble, she muttered, though her tone softened when I kissed her hand. He is, I said quietly, knowing it was true. Nathan needed help, and I wasn't going to let him down. Once Emma's giggles subsided, I smiled to myself. One thing I've always admired about her is her sharp wit and sense of humor. It's part of why I can never stay mad at her for long. I decided to head downstairs to check on Nathan. The sound of his thunderous snoring assured me he was still alive, though functionally comatose might have been a better description. I slipped a pillow under his head, and he let out a noise so loud it could have woken the dead. His breath, reeking of alcohol, hit me like a wall. What the hell, Nathan? I muttered, stepping back as the stench seemed to cling to me. Hours later, a disheveled, zombie-like version of my friend emerged from the basement. His bloodshot eyes and sluggish movements painted a picture of exhaustion and distress. As he shuffled around my kitchen, Emma gave me a pointed look that said, "Keep him under control, or he's out." I approached Nathan cautiously. "How are you feeling, buddy?" "Feels like my wife cheated on me, humiliated me in front of everyone, then ran me over with a truck," he replied flatly. "Well, at least your memory's intact. 2 out of 3 ain't bad." I joked lightly, trying to diffuse the tension. His eyes narrowed. "My memory's fine. I remember your damn story, too, and how you socked me in the face over it." I rubbed my jaw, still tender from the punch he'd delivered earlier. "That part's a little fuzzy. Might need a repeat just to jog my memory," I teased. Despite his words, there wasn't any real venom in his tone. I knew he wasn't about to hit me again. "I've said it before, Nathan, and I'll say it again. I'm really sorry about that story. I didn't think it would blow up like it did, and I certainly didn't think you'd find out about it." "Well, people read it," he said with a wry smile. "Even got a message from some guy I know. Said he heard about the party from someone else, then read your story online." "Who's this guy?" "Some loudmouth named Harry from Virginia. Nice enough once you get past his attitude." "Oh, and for the record, he thinks you're an idiot too," Nathan said, his grin widening. I laughed. "Yeah, well, I'm sure he thought that even before the story." Nathan chuckled and nodded. The tension between us finally began to ease. I clapped him on the back, and he didn't flinch. "So, why do you have to paint me as such a wimp in your story? Did I really just bolt like that?" "Wimp? You took the guy down in one punch. If you boxed like that in college, you'd have been a champ. Nobody sees you as weak." "Damn right," he muttered, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. "Still got it, idiot." He shook his head, his voice blending pride and laughter. "I really handed him his ass, didn't I?" "Oh yeah, you did. Bet you're sweet, ass I couldn't pull that off." Not in one hit, at least, he teased, nudging me with his elbow. As the laughter died down, he sighed. So, what happened after I left? I kept thinking the cops would come knocking. I leaned against the counter. Well, after you left, Vanessa let out this wail like she was being dragged to the gallows and collapsed on the floor. Emma rushed to her side, helping her to the couch. Then Claire came downstairs with Ethan, who was holding his head like it was going to fall off. When Vanessa saw them, she lost it. She lunged at him, calling him an idiot and blaming him for everything. Ethan just stood there, looking dazed. Nathan chuckled bitterly. Bet that didn't last long. Oh, it didn't. Claire stepped in, yelling at Vanessa to back off. Stop it, Vanessa! Cut it out, she screamed. But Tarzan being saved by Catwoman? Yeah, that just made him look worse. Nathan shook his head, a grin creeping onto his face. What a mess. Yeah, Ethan finally mumbled some half-assed apology about being drunk, and Vanessa collapsed again, sobbing. What do I do now? It was chaos. Then Claire decided to take Ethan to the ER. Turns out he had a concussion. He wanted to press charges, but Claire and Vanessa talked him out of it. That must have been fun, Nathan said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. They basically begged him not to. Vanessa knew if he got arrested, there'd be no hope of patching things up. Nathan laughed darkly. Patch things up? There's nothing left to fix. I sighed, nodding. So, what about you? After you sped off, we all worried. Where'd you go? I just drove, Nathan admitted. Had no destination. Just needed to get away. The stop signs, traffic lights, none of it mattered. Eventually, I ended up in front of my mom's house. That must have been tough, I said quietly. He shrugged. Yeah, well, sometimes life throws you curveballs. The only way to deal with it is to do something unexpected. Affection was never my parents' strong suit. My dad's a man of few words, and those words are always direct and to the point. Hugs are quick and practical, and I love you is a phrase reserved for life or death moments. My mom is no different, stoic and reserved. It's a wonder how they ever ended up together, let alone conceive me. They were either destined to find each other or doomed to remain alone. All right, Nathan, you know where everything is. I'm going back to bed, my mom said as her frail figure disappeared around the corner. Her voice trailed off, adding, in lockup. The next morning I checked my phone. 29 missed calls. 15 from Vanessa, a handful from Daniel, and a few from others at the party. I ignored them. I didn't need their questions or prying. They were probably just hungry for gossip about the affair. After a restless night filled with pain, anger, and confusion, my mind was a whirlwind of questions. What happened to Ethan after I left? Did he end up in the hospital? Did he press charges? Would the police come knocking on my door? I couldn't face the possibility, so I slipped out of the house before my mom woke. I left a note explaining my absence, instructing her to tell Vanessa I'd contact her when I was ready, if she called. I parked near my favorite bar, seeking solace in the form of strong drinks. For the next 2 weeks, I hid at my mom's house, venturing out only to drop off the kids or retrieve belongings. My encounters with Vanessa were brief and tense, ending with her upset. One evening, I overheard her on the phone. My ears perked up, ready to explode if it was Ethan. But it wasn't. It was Claire. Somehow, that felt both better and worse. My days were divided between my parents' place and the bar. With Dad away on business, it was just Mom and me. Joy. She wasn't much for deep conversations, though she listened quietly and offered words of encouragement. You'll figure it out, she'd say whenever I admitted I didn't know what to do next. Her lack of probing questions was oddly comforting. It spared me the agony of retelling everything or enduring emotional coddling. I spent my time grieving in silence, using up all my sick and personal days to avoid the outside world. Even though no one from work had been at the party, living in a small town meant gossip spread like wildfire. I wasn't just dealing with infidelity. I was facing public humiliation. The whispers and stares, the narrative of poor Nathan, too distracted by adult films to notice his wife's needs, haunted me. Eventually, I turned off my phone. The incessant calls and texts were too much. As for the police, whether it was dumb luck or Ethan's bruised pride, they never came. That small mercy didn't do much to lift the weight crushing me, though. What struck me was how my friends reacted. They sent emails, called, but none showed up at my mom's house. It wasn't neglect. They simply didn't know what to say or do. Their silence, while well-meaning, was both a blessing and a curse. It left me alone with my thoughts, which was sometimes worse than dealing with their awkward pity. To drown out the images of that night and the ones my imagination kept conjuring, Vanessa and Ethan, together, I turned to alcohol. Lila, the bartender at my go-to spot, became my temporary salvation. She poured my drinks, offered a listening ear when needed, and knew when to leave me be. The hardest part of staying with my mom was being away from my kids. It was a self-imposed exile, but that didn't make it sting any less. Seeing them meant facing Vanessa, and every interaction with her felt like trying to cross a frozen lake in bare feet. One day, Lila showed me a story online that pushed me out of my spiral. It was about the infamous Halloween party, complete with 2 catwomen, a pirate, and that damn Tarzan. The story mirrored my reality too closely. Fuming, I dialed Daniel's number. At Daniel's house, I stared at the plate in front of me. So, what's the plan, Nathan? Divorce? Separation? Or do you just want to wring her neck? Daniel asked, half joking but fully concerned. I chuckled bitterly. Do I have to choose? I replied, my voice hollow. The agony of Halloween replayed in my mind, Vanessa's words echoing like a broken record. Daniel hesitated, then pressed on. Nathan, I have to ask, and you can tell me to buzz off if this is too much. Personal, but about that adult film thing, I ventured cautiously. What did she mean by that? Nathan flushed, his discomfort clear as he shifted in his seat. So what? I watch them occasionally. Not every day, he said defensively. Are you trying to imply she doesn't? Or that I don't? I raised my hands in mock surrender. Easy, Nathan. I'm not judging. But Vanessa made it sound like you were watching them instead of being, well, intimate with her. That's true, he admitted quietly, then added sharply. Buzz off, Daniel. This is too personal. All right, fair enough, buddy, I said, backing off slightly. But I just want to understand what went wrong. You two always seemed so happy. I never saw this coming. Nathan stared down at his plate, absently dragging his fork in slow circles across it. She just doesn't get it, Dan, he finally said, his voice heavy with emotion. What doesn't she get? I asked gently. He let his fork drop and ran his hands over his face, taking a deep breath. When he spoke again, his words carried a mix of exhaustion, sadness, and guilt. I work 10 to 12 hours a day, 5 days a week if I'm lucky. When I get home, I'm drained. I'm stressed out. I deal with irate investors, managers, sexual harassment claims, discrimination complaints, and everything in between. If something goes wrong at one of the restaurants, like a customer spotting a rat and demanding free food, it's on me to fix it. He paused, gathering himself before continuing. I stayed silent, waiting for him to let it all out. Vanessa, he hesitated. She needs a lot of foreplay. I'm talking 30 minutes of build-up before she's ready. Then, when we finally start, she wants to switch positions constantly, and she expects me to keep talking dirty the whole time. Don't get me wrong, I love her, and when I have the energy, it's amazing. But I don't have the stamina to do that every night. Not after the days I have. I could hear the pain in his voice. He glanced away as he continued, his tone softer. Rich, sometimes it just feels easier to be alone. I hate admitting that. I mean, what guy doesn't dream of having a wife like Vanessa? She's beautiful, passionate, and she genuinely loves making love. I know I'm lucky to have her. But then his eyes clouded over, and I saw something deeper. Regret, guilt, maybe even shame. But at the same time, I work my ass off for her and the girls. I give them everything I didn't have growing up. My dad was so frugal he wouldn't spend a dime he didn't absolutely have to. I want more for my kids, you know. He shook his head and sighed. I love spending time with them. They're my whole world. But sometimes, after dealing with work all day, I just don't want to do anything for anyone. Not for Vanessa, not for the girls, not even for myself. I nodded, understanding starting to dawn on me. How long had it been since you two, before the party? I asked hesitantly. Nathan frowned and shook his head. I don't know, Dan. I really don't. I didn't even realize how much time had passed. Yeah, I murmured, a flicker of comprehension lighting in my mind. But before I could say more, anger flashed in Nathan's eyes. But that doesn't give her the right to do what she did, he said sharply. I didn't humiliate her in front of everyone. I didn't cheat on her. She should have come to me if she had a problem. Why didn't she come to me? I took a deep breath. It was risky, but I had to try. Maybe for the same reason you never told her why you watch. Well, communication can be tough, especially if you don't even realize something needs to be said. Nathan's eyes narrowed slightly. How do you even begin to tell your spouse you're unhappy? He challenged. Simply put, I replied, you say, I'm unhappy. He let out a bitter laugh. Touché. Sensing the tension rising again, I decided to change gears. All right, Nathan, let's talk about my wall. Nathan caught on to the joke and grinned. Call it even for this one idiot. I laughed. I thought punching me in the face already evened things out. Not quite, he quipped, shaking his head with a small smile. Seeing him like this, relaxed and almost like his old self, was refreshing, even if I knew it wouldn't last. Just then, I noticed Emma standing in the doorway, a peculiar expression on her face. Her eyes flicked toward Nathan before locking on mine. She gestured for me to come over, her urgency clear. What's wrong, sweetheart? I asked as I approached her. She glanced around nervously and drew me closer, whispering so Nathan couldn't hear. It's Vanessa. She's here. Vanessa found out Nathan's here. She's on her way, Emma said, her voice tense as she drew me aside. Adam must have said something, venting or just being careless. He probably gave away Nathan's location. I felt frustration rise like a wave. You've got to intercept her at the door, Emma. Emma raised her hands in protest, shaking her head. No way, Daniel. I'm not stepping into this mess. Nathan's been avoiding her for 2 weeks. He needs to face this. She cheated on him, Emma. Have you forgotten that? I shot back, my voice taut with anger. Emma's expression didn't waver. No, I haven't. The hole in the wall is a constant reminder. But Nathan can't keep running from this, Daniel. He has to deal with it head on. You can help him through it, but he needs to face her. I opened my mouth to argue further, but she silenced me with a gentle pat on my chest. Then, leaving the conversation, and me behind, she walked away. I turned to Nathan, who sat at the table, seemingly oblivious to the storm about to arrive. Nathan, I called, my voice firm. I heard your conversation. You're not exactly a great whisperer. Vanessa's on her way. He rubbed his chin, winced at the lingering soreness, then sighed deeply. After a moment, his expression shifted into something more resolute. Fine, he said, standing up and pushing away from the table. He turned to meet my gaze, his determination clear. I'm ready to face this. He walked out to my back porch just as the sky was painted in soft hues by the setting sun. It was serene, almost comforting, a stark contrast to the chaos brewing. Nathan, honey? Vanessa's voice broke through the calm, frantic and tinged with desperation. He didn't respond. He didn't even turn to look at her, keeping his gaze fixed on the fading light. Vanessa seemed to take his silence as permission and made her way onto the porch, settling beside him. She pulled her knees to her chest, a protective posture that seemed to shield her from the weight of the confrontation. I've been searching everywhere for you, she said softly, her voice trembling. Nathan didn't look at her. I've been in the same place all night, he replied flatly, deliberately echoing the words he'd used weeks ago when he found her with Ethan in Daniel's kitchen. Vanessa flinched at the words, but pressed on. Nathan, we need to talk. He nodded without looking at her. Go ahead, he said simply, his tone giving nothing away. From the corner of his eye, he could sense her anguish. Her voice cracked as she spoke, filled with emotion. I love you, Nathan. It's a lie, he interrupted coldly. Stop it, Nathan. Just stop. Vanessa's voice rose, trembling with frustration. You can't claim I don't love you, not after everything. You humiliated me, Vanessa. In front of everyone. I would never do that to you, he shot back, his voice rising. What are you talking about? She fired back. You stormed into that kitchen like a lunatic, shouting about my affair with Ethan in front of everyone. If you wanted to talk privately, you could have pulled me aside. But no, you aired it out first. Her words gave him pause. A part of him knew she wasn't entirely wrong, but he wasn't ready to concede. Phoenix, I could have handled it better, he admitted grudgingly. But I didn't start this. Your boyfriend confronted me. He rubbed your betrayal in my face, Vanessa. I was furious. Could you blame me? I know, Nathan, she whispered, her voice softening as guilt etched across her face. I know. He sighed deeply, his anger momentarily draining. Vanessa, why didn't you just come to me with our problems? Why didn't you talk to me? Because, Nathan, she snapped, her eyes flashing with a mix of frustration and pain. You wouldn't have understood. How could you understand the pain of realizing that at my best, I still wasn't enough for you? He frowned, her words hitting harder than he expected. She continued, her voice trembling. Do you remember my birthday? I went all out, Nathan. I bought the sexiest lingerie I could find, took a luxurious bubble bath, spent hours getting ready for you. I wanted to make the night special, but you were too tired to notice, too stressed to care. I didn't forget your birthday, he countered. I took you to dinner, didn't I? We even made love that night. Sure we did, she said bitterly. But you couldn't even enjoy it. You pushed me away afterward, saying you were tired. Then, later that night, I woke up to find you at your computer, watching porn. Do you have any idea how that felt, Nathan? Do you understand what that did to me? Her voice cracked as she broke down completely, her body trembling with sobs. Nathan sat there, stunned into silence. Slowly, her words began to sink in, giving him a perspective he hadn't fully considered before. All right, he said quietly. I get it. I took you for granted. But what about you, Vanessa? Why Ethan? Why Claire? Did they make you feel whole again? Tears streamed down her cheeks as she nodded. Yes, Nathan, they did. Her confession cut him deeply. He sat back, his mind reeling from the weight of her words. How many times? He asked quietly. Twice, she whispered, her voice barely audible. He felt like he'd been punched. The drunken encounter he could almost forgive. But the second time? That was deliberate. What were you two talking about in the kitchen that night? He pressed. Her eyes flared with a mix of anger and guilt. He was drunk, she said. He told me I looked amazing in my costume, then suggested we go back to their place. I was trying to shut him down, Nathan. I told him it couldn't happen again. But he didn't listen. That's when you walked in. And the costume? Nathan asked bitterly. Were you hoping Ethan would appreciate it? No, she said firmly, her gaze locking onto his. I wore it for you. I knew you loved Michelle Pfeiffer in Batman Returns. You told me once that her Catwoman suit drove you wild. I wanted you to see me the way you used to. But you didn't. You barely looked at me. Her voice broke again as she whispered. I almost skipped the party altogether, Nathan. I thought maybe, just maybe, we'd stay home and finally feel like us again. I was yearning for you that night, Nathan, Vanessa whispered, her voice breaking. I hoped when we got home, you'd take me, that we'd reconnect. And then, Ethan happened. She spat his name out like it was venom. Well, none of this would have happened if you hadn't slept with him. I snapped. Why didn't you just talk to me, Vanessa? She shook her head sadly, tears streaming down her face. I don't know, Nathan. I wish I did. I don't have an answer. I've thought about it every single day, and I still don't understand why I didn't. I exhaled slowly, the anger giving way to an overwhelming exhaustion. Well, I guess there's enough blame to go around, I said finally. Vanessa turned to me, her tear-streaked face filled with hope. So what now, Nathan? I don't want to lose you. I love you so much. I'll do anything for us to get through this. Her words swirled in my mind as I fought to make sense of it all. Could we get through this? Could I forgive her, knowing I'd played my own part in the downfall of our marriage? Could we ever leave the past behind? I don't know, Vanessa, I admitted. So much has happened. It's going to take a lot for us to start healing. A glimmer of hope appeared in her eyes. She reached for my hand, gripping it tightly. Please, honey, I'll do anything. Just give me a chance to show you how much I love you. For the first time in weeks, I met her gaze and felt a flicker of hope in myself. Maybe, just maybe, we could mend the shattered pieces if we both fought hard enough. All right, Vanessa, I said cautiously. But it's going to take a lot. First, we need counseling. It's not optional. We have to learn how to communicate with each other. She kissed my cheek and threw her arms around my neck. Yes, darling. Whatever you say. And second, I hesitated. You need to cut ties with Claire. The light in her eyes dimmed immediately, and I felt a pang in my chest. What did you say? She asked, her voice trembling. I said you need to end your friendship with Claire. Vanessa's face twisted in disbelief. Nathan, why are you asking me to do this? I leaned back in my chair, staring at her. Seriously, Vanessa? You cheated on me with her and her husband. What do you expect me to do? Just trust that it won't happen again? Every time you're with her or talk to her, do you know what goes through my mind? How am I supposed to heal if the wound keeps getting salt rubbed into it? She recoiled like I'd struck her. Tears welled up in her eyes, but I held firm. The silence between us stretched unbearably long, the weight of it pressing down on both of us. You want me to choose between my best friend and my husband? She said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I can't do it, Nathan. Please don't make me. Her words hit me like a wrecking ball, and the agony coursing through me was worse than anything I'd felt the night I discovered her betrayal. It was worse than catching her with Ethan, because there was no anger to shield me this time. Just the raw, painful realization that I wasn't enough for her. She couldn't choose me over Claire. Dominic's irrelevant now, I said quietly. This is bigger, Vanessa, but you can't sever ties with Claire, can you? That bond is too strong, isn't it? Stronger than your love for me. Tears fell freely from her eyes, but she didn't deny it. She couldn't. The truth hung heavy between us. We divorced less than a year later. Vanessa fought hard to stop it, even humiliating herself in ways I never thought I'd see. She begged me in my workplace, sobbing and pleading for another chance. It was painful to watch her pride crumble, but I stood firm. Deep down, I wanted to give her another chance. I even hoped, for a fleeting moment, that I'd find a way to forgive her. But I couldn't. Not while Claire remained in the picture. It wasn't just Ethan, or even the betrayal itself. It was the fact that she refused to let go of the one thing that had played a pivotal role in our marriage's destruction. No spouse should have to share. A year later, the wounds still ache. There are no real winners here. Vanessa and I do our best to co-parent, avoiding putting each other down in front of the kids. But the scars remain. There was one glimmer of progress, though. This Halloween, Nathan brought a date to my party. She wasn't dressed as Catwoman, and maybe she's just a rebound, not his next great love. But seeing him take a step forward gave me hope. Healing isn't tidy or quick. It's messy and gradual. Vanessa, Claire, and Ethan didn't attend. They've cut off contact with most of us, and Claire still staunchly defends Vanessa, accusing Nathan of being unfair and forcing her to make an impossible choice. But in my view, it wasn't impossible at all. Vanessa simply didn't want to be married as much as Nathan needed her to be. She said she'd do anything to save their marriage. But when it came to making the one sacrifice that truly mattered, her actions spoke louder than her words ever could. In the end, he's better off without her.